Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Chris Storey. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, because I just had a brain just stopped thinking. My brain just stopped working. So I know that I didn't hit my head, but maybe if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into this episode, which is all about cyber soldiers.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me, Chris. I am a 12-ish year, I would say, person. I won't call myself an expert. Although we certainly have areas in which we consider ourselves that. But anyway, work for a couple different MSPs. I currently work for Qriar. We're a global cybersecurity provider focused on identity security, identity access management, privileged access management, identity governance, etc. We do quite a bit beyond that. You're kind of full service cybersecurity shop, but heavily focused on identity integration, customization, deployment, etc. I have, again, been around the space for about 12 years. I'm somewhat unique in that I'm kind of not crossing the bridge, but I have a foot in the MSP space and a foot in the enterprise cybersecurity space, and that's given me some interesting perspectives over the years. There are certainly some differences there, but I'm sure we'll get into more of my background on the cast here.
Sure.
So that's probably enough for now.
Well, it's funny you talk about the MSP space and the enterprise space, and I think the world of MSPs as we know it is largely servicing in the SMB space. And I think when we start talking about cybersecurity, the rules are different. Like you can be a small MSP providing cybersecurity services into a very large enterprise space because you're specialized, you provide unique services. But oftentimes, most MSPs don't think about that. They think about themselves as we're a 3 to 5 man shop. Maybe they're bigger than that, maybe not, but they're largely providing services to similar sized companies, right? Like 10 to 15, 20 employees. Maybe on the high end, they've got some clients that have 100 plus employees, and they're providing them with generally everything IT services related. There's no one specific, like we only manage their firewalls. They may have clients that are in the portfolio of like that client, we only manage their firewalls, but by and large, jack of all trades, master of as many as we can. We know how that goes.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a shift, especially in the cybersecurity services space, where the ones that have matured rapidly are finding that they can provide the services needed to their clients as long as they're willing to accept, I either have to build this, which is extremely expensive for smaller MSPs, or I have to partner and subscribe to something third party. And we're seeing a lot of that happen. I think maybe 10 years ago, that would have been very difficult. There were not enough players that were they felt like that they were going to be competently on my side. It was more of like, if I use them in 6 to 12 months, they'll have taken my clients away. And we know that
Exactly.
pure play cybersecurity vendors and even MSSPs, they don't want the rest of that client. They only want the piece that you've engaged them with. So I always like to get that out of the way of like, yes, there may be some out there that still exists, but by and large, just make sure your T's and C's and your contracts are correct, and I don't think you'll have any problems. But today's conversation is specifically about you've named it, and obviously if you Google it, you'll find a lot of information out there, largely coming from the government. How do we address the cyber workforce shortage? Some of what the DoD and the rest of our many acronym agencies are trying to solve for, and I think we're also seeing this in the private sector. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I want you to kind of give me your vision on this. But one of the things that's super challenging right now for anybody that's entering into the space is the looking over your shoulder. Is someone ready to axe me from the job I haven't even gotten yet? The blame game, the shaming. Not to point any fingers at anybody dealing with this right now, but I can't imagine being the individual that pushed the button at a XDR EDR company recently that cost 8.5 million endpoints to go and give you the frowny face, the blue
Yeah.
frowny face. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about your vision, and then let's dive into it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you definitely did a good job summarizing one of the issues here, and that is the cyber workforce shortage. But I think we're a little short-sighted. We have a lack of vision in just how bad that problem actually is when you put it on a global scale. We talk about IT, and your organization CompTIA does a great job, and I've heard many a keynote about investing in the next generation and how important all of that is. And that's all extremely valid. I would say more valid than it's ever been. But when you take this to the world stage, um, you know, uh, uh, I won't drop a lot of quotes here, but one that really puts this in perspective is on the cybersecurity stage at the global level. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, came out a few weeks ago, and the quote's just so powerful. He said, if you took every member of the cyber personnel from the FBI and focused them only on the threats out of China, we would still be outnumbered at least 50 to 1. So, what are the takeaways there? That's only the FBI, right? But the FBI is the largest, I would say, defensive cybersecurity organization who's trying to protect U.S. critical infrastructure. So that's a big problem. We have a lot of
Right.
threats aside from just those originating out of China. Say nothing of the other nation state actors, you know, um, domestic actors, etc. So the fact that we're outnumbered 50 to 1 from only one source of threats when there are quite so many,
Yeah.
we can't even quantify how outnumbered we really are. And not to sound doomsday, but it's just the reality of the situation. So what do we do about that? It's difficult, especially when you look at US critical infrastructure. 85% of it is private. It's not government controlled. Like people tend to
Right.
have the perception that, it's US critical infrastructure. Of course, it's all government, but CISA defines 16 sectors of US critical
Right.
infrastructure. And again, 85% of it is privately held. And the average number of employees is somewhere between 2 and 300. So these are organizations that are firmly in the SMB space, don't have the big budgets you would assume people that are controlling critical infrastructure would have. Thus, they can't afford high-end cybersecurity people. They can afford to upskill those people. They
Right.
don't have strong incident response plans, et cetera, et cetera. So I
I
could go
mean,
on
one
for
of our
days
audiences,
here,
I
but
mean, our key audience is one of those 16 categories, right? Like,
exactly,
and then if you look
exactly.
at while we've defined them here, we haven't put a lot of regulation on them. But if you look globally, most countries that have a cybersecurity program have articulated or identified what it means to be providing IT services to another entity. And there's some, albeit not necessarily great, focus on how well they need to perform, but there's at least something that says, by all means, check these boxes and prove to us that you can, meet some of these requirements. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's super interesting, right? Because we talked about the smiley or frowny face of blue screen. The reality is that that was not espionage. That was not, the attempt to cripple infrastructure. And it's a reminder that technology, as great as it is a very fragile ecosystem by its very nature because our goals from the beginning have been how do we solve problems that reduces FTE, improves efficiency, and the costs, obviously being reduced. And I think if we look at where we are today, we're not going to roll this back. There is no, push the ball back up the mountain.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's a continuous downward, and there is no end in sight, and it continues to go faster. So I think that was I just wanted to make sure I pushed you in the direction of like it's happening quicker. So in your how do we solve this? Yeah, time is not in our favor.
Not at all. Not at all. And there are, we'll say federal level clocks that are ticking.
Sure.
There are lines in the sand, proverbially speaking, that we think certain things are going to happen, and that's part of the mission here is we need to shore up. And I keep saying critical infrastructure, and that that puts a very particular image in people's minds, I think, but I would encourage everybody look at the 16 individual sectors that map to US critical infrastructure.
Right.
It's the vast majority of organizations in the country. People think power, telecom, supply chain, but they don't think the services and organizations that are behind those things underpinning them, like any blue collar organization that's doing engine repair on a large scale, like
Yeah,
they're in
imagine
it,
imagine having
agriculture.
yeah, I was just gonna say on agriculture, imagine having the global GPS systems that are heavily relied upon for during harvest. If that was to get tampered with, we would have that would be catastrophic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I keep, there's a few drums around this arena that I keep banging on lately, but we've seen attacks on individual organizations, Colonial Pipeline being an easy example to point to.
Sure.
That was only one. It had ripple effects downstream and affected almost every other sector. And again, I'm trying not to be doomsday here, but what if you were able to affect multiple large organizations across sectors? We see the ripple effect of one. It's just it's extremely important is the
Well, I don't
point.
like your doomsday approach on that because I think the reality is, unless there's some, evil genius out
Yeah,
there looking at that, I think to a large extent, I think Colonial Pipeline was a good example of it. Cross sectors is in many cases going to be the repercussions of the attack, not the
yep.
intention behind it. So,
Mm,
which makes it even scarier because if evil genius has a goal in mind, right? It's
yes.
disruption with purpose in most cases. But to have a ripple effect across, like, hey, I'm the evil genius that did it, and now I can't get gas or ho-hos at my local 7-Eleven. Like, you've really like this went further than I wanted it to go, right? And now
Yes.
there's you can't undo it. It's not like you can just be like, I just kidding, I didn't mean to push the enter key.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, how many attacks across the last couple of decades have we seen that were intended for something that ended up having a global impact?
Well,
You
every
know,
single movie that portrays it from a Hollywood standpoint, even their examples all show the real scary side of this that we try to say is make believe and only for cinema.
yeah.
But those are potentially real examples, no different than 1984 was way before its time, right? And like, what's not true that has come true from that?
Yeah, yeah. It's and I take kind of a hard-nosed I wouldn't call it doomsday, but it definitely has that air to it, just to express that it's important, for people
Yeah,
to take it seriously. It's not that there's no hope. There is a lot of hope
sure.
here, and there's a whole program, we're building to try to help in this mission is how we see it. Um, so anyway, don't lose hope. It's
Right,
not like
right.
we're past the point of no return here. There's a lot we can do. We're very resilient as a country. I think we've proven that many, many, many times. And to your point about, that's not their stated intention or, even something they considered, right. Nobody's playing four-dimensional chess from a cybersecurity attack perspective,
Sure.
as far as we know. There may be countries that have these grand plans and whatnot, but anytime we've seen an attempt at a coordinated attack, it has failed, thankfully. But one or two of these things gets through, and in the case of Colonial Pipeline and many others, it does have ripple effects. And one more thing you touched on there is the effect on the individual. That's
Sure.
that's the thing that I keep to cyber folks and non-cyber folks alike that I keep stressing is there haven't been many incidents that affected, at least on a large scale, the individual.
Right.
We see the effects, we hear about it, but it affects stocks, and if you own stocks in that company, sure, it's affecting you, but the downstream effects aren't there. So Change Healthcare, Colonial Pipeline started to change this, and what I keep stressing to people is you're going to see that more and more, and people are probably not going to start taking it seriously until they go to the ATM and they can't get money out.
Right.
Things like that affects Chris, which could apply to either one of us here,
Right.
on an individual level. You said it, gas and ho-hos. What are the things that we've become accustomed to that we take for granted that are very susceptible? And I think I hope it doesn't take something like that for us on a larger scale to really start taking it seriously.
Have you seen the movie Book of Eli with Denzel Washington?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So there's a line in the movie where I think her name is it Solana?
Some
She can't read,
Solana?
right? So she wants to be taught how to read, and she's asking a lot of questions. And one of the questions she asks is, "What was it like before the Flash?"
Mm,
And he explains to her that people were very much had more than they needed. They were quick to throw things away. That today, or today is in the apocalyptic future of this movie, people kill each other over.
mhm.
Water is no longer a commodity; it is a luxury, which is really interesting. And I think to your point, not to get into the doom and gloom, but with a fragile ecosystem like this, our opportunity to correct courses today, not in 10 years. The wars that we're seeing take place are largely happening, behind the luminescent, screen,
Yeah.
at command line prompts, not not via like it's not the missiles crossing borders, right? Like it's
Mhm.
happening, and we just like I just saw some of the stuff that was posted just recently. It's like what cyber hackers can uncover from an information standpoint. So forget the damage that they can inflict by pushing the red button, and they have no idea what the red button does to
Yeah.
whatever water or chemical infrastructure. But to just be able to retrieve volumes of communication and documentation that show exactly what others are thinking and doing, that
Mhm.
in the right or wrong hands changes the course of history.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very interesting. And it's funny you mentioned the red button. I was joking with a friend the other day about the how it seems like offensive cybersecurity people with nefarious intent. I shouldn't say cybersecurity, offensive, attackers, hackers, whatever you want to call them. I struggle with the word hacker. It has this,
I think
you
it's
know,
just nefarious threat actors because
yeah,
now it's like, hey, I subscribe to, eBay or Newegg to find out what's on sale. And, I
yeah,
got the
yeah.
15,000, credit cards that were just leaked yesterday, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. So my joke was just that they it seems like they have a complete inability to resist their intrusive thoughts. You mentioned the red button. It's like if they get
yeah.
in a network and there's a red button, they're pushing it. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
we
just to see
saw
what
that
happens.
we see this with IoT, right? But when you do IoT to operational technologies, right? An infrastructure that's built largely more than 50 years ago. Like, hey, what happens if I push that button? Oh, well, that turns off the water cooling to, the nuclear power plant, right? Like,
Yeah.
they don't know that that's necessarily what it does, because it's not like it says in plain English, like, hey, this button controls this thing, because they didn't ever need that to be something that was accessible from the internet. The
Yeah.
internet didn't
Yeah.
exist when they came up with these
OT,
ideas. Yeah.
you know? Yeah, absolutely.
We've really spent more time on doom and gloom than I think is probably,
Yeah.
I can see
Fair
people
enough.
right now trying to figure out, how do I stop this? They have no answers. But Chris, what is the answer? Or maybe what is the idea that helps us get to answers?
Yeah. So, that's kind of why I stumbled a bit in the beginning with the word expert. I stay away from that word with intent. I this is going to sound a little bit arrogant, but I think I'm smart enough to know that these things change so rapidly that it's a little bit irresponsible to call yourself an expert,
Right.
a lead learner, if you will, somebody who's always striving
Dangerously ahead
to.
of the curve. That sounds bad too.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no good way to say it, but myself, the team, experienced in this area. I'm on the sales and business development side, so I tend not to get my hands dirty, but I'm definitely more technical than your average salesperson. I could say that pretty confidently. And what you do about it, I'm not necessarily going to answer. I'm going to answer what we're doing about it, or at least what we're doing to take a chunk out of the problem. It's essentially what we see as a new vertical forming underneath our feet, and it's a vertical we've coined corporate national security. So it's I hate to add another buzzword into the buzzword soup that is the entire industry right now, but that was the best phrase that we could come up with. And I have to give credit where it's due in a second, but the uh the best phrase we could come up with that really rammed home exactly what it was we were aimed at, and that is national security, but focusing on corporations. So in the same
Sure.
spirit of that Christopher Wray quote, and Assistant Attorney General has another fantastic quote that need not be said, but the gist of it is that essentially cybersecurity personnel within these organizations are serving on the front lines, because they are. That's what we do about it, is the short answer, and not having an actual solution, but it's we stand up individuals, teams within organizations to be able to serve on the front lines. That's what we do about it. Now, how we do that is a different question, and the resources we provide them. So, in the spirit of corporate national security, I have to give credit where it's due. I would say it was coined by a friend of mine, Zach Schmidt. He's currently serving as VP of Sales with an organization called Red Trace, who we partner with very, very tightly. Anyway, so there's a program undergirding this term. There's a lot that goes into this, but it's a 3-step cybersecurity program, and we don't necessarily need to go into all the steps here. But the step 1, I think, is the most important and a good starting point for most organizations, and it begins with incident response. So providing you an incident response retainer from organizations that really know what they're doing in terms of incident response. And that's another term that floats around the industry that I think begs for definition. What is incident response? We're talking, Web 2, Web 3 incident response, not just the traditional stuff, but also the ability to, proverbially speaking, like chase the robbers down the street and collect the money as they dump it out of the vehicle, like an
Right.
actual attempt to go recover that crypto you just
Sure.
spent to get your network back. Anyway, so incident response is a big, big, big thing. I could bang that particular drum the entire length of this podcast. It's extremely important. The CrowdStrike incident, people think cybersecurity when they think incident response, but it's so much more than that. So that
Yeah,
that
heaven
is a
forbid the
particular.
building get knocked out. Right? Like
Yeah.
the old, like we used to do IR planning did not involve, like, if you get hit by ransomware was the first thing we thought of. It was like,
Yeah.
what if you have a flood or a tornado? I mean, we remember
Yeah.
the Joplin incident where, that was a pretty significant disaster. I mean, it literally created its own new, dirt road highway, right? Everything that had
Yeah.
been there before was now just a dirt path. So I guess that raises a really big question for me. And I've been doing a lot of travel, and I was on an airplane yesterday, and one of the things that went through my head was, as they were doing the safety announcements, like how to use a seatbelt, like, because
Mm.
people still haven't figured that out yet, right? Like, why do they use a seatbelt that's not like the one in the car, right? Like,
Mhm.
why at this point in time do we have to, like, you don't get in your car and have the car radio come on and say, before putting the car in gear, please fasten your seatbelt. It doesn't do
Yeah.
that, but it does ding at you. Like, can you imagine if we got on an airplane and the dinging happened until all seatbelts were put on? Like that would
Yeah.
actually be awesome. Like,
Yeah.
and it would flash above the person's seat, like, 34C, if you don't put your seatbelt on, we are going to escort you off this
Yeah,
plane.
exactly. Start
But
calling
but
them
it
out.
gets right, but it's worse than that, right? Like, I won't say the airlines, but I was watching the safety briefing, and it drove me nuts. Like, nobody is doing it live in the aisle. It's
Mhm.
on my TV screen. They're using a theatrical stage. Like, if I could be on a plane that looked like that one, that would be absolutely amazing. Yet
Yeah,
no one has seen a plane that looks like that. And then as they
exactly.
go to the different things, they got this little, well, I won't say because it'll give away who the airline is, but like
Yep.
it just went on, and you're like, and then at the end of it, it was like watching an SNL wrap up at the end when they show the credits and everybody's hugging and shaking hands. That was the end of the safety video, and you're like,
Yep.
oh. But the reason I share that is, like, when have we ever done like a proactive, like, hey, in the event of emergency, and just like you would have a fire alarm go off for a trial run in a school or in a convention center, and you have to go outside, why do we never do an airplane, like, hey, let's see if the slides work?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, are
Yeah.
you just trying to make me feel
Yeah.
warm and fuzzy? We're going to fly across the continental US and you want me to put a life preserver on? Yet I've
Oh
never
man.
seen any of them ever get inflated.
Well, not to mention, I mean, the airlines are so. I have a lot of jokes about TSA and the illusion of safety, and just the most obvious one is anything over 3.5 ounces is considered a bomb, and
Well, unless you have a
and what.
prescription for it. So, like, if you have dry eyes, you
Yeah.
can get away with the pump action half gallon that fits in its
Yeah.
own bag.
Yeah, but the joke, there was some comedian back in the day who said something to this effect, but if it's considered, explosive material, if it's over 3.4 ounces, what do they do with it? They
Right.
put all the explosive material in the same bin in the most densely populated section of the airport,
That's
right?
right.
Like, so like,
So
it's
so I
so it's so silly. But
so
anyway,
so my point was like we talk about all these things like reactive, like what we
yeah,
would do in the event something bad has happened. How do we shift this to proactive and preventative? Because I believe that we've spent a lot of energy over the last 2 years talking about the right of boom, the
hmm
or blast radius. Something has happened, it impacts
oh
me,
yeah,
you, and everybody else. But we also talk about the bad guys only have to get it right one time, good guys have to get it right every time. Like there is
yep.
no one fail. Um, but are we not at a point where even though we're not perfect at this, that if we were investing more time and energy into the proactive, that's where the real dent is? I mean, I get it.
Yep.
If the blast radius is reduced, obviously the payout is in theory less to the bad guys, making them less interested in doing it, which I think is a big one. Like if we can reduce the value to a threat
Mhm.
actor of like hitting a hospital system, which like shame
Yep.
on them, like, hey, let's take out a pediatrics hospital so they can't treat kids. Like
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of capitalistic mindset you have. Like this is pretty sick. Like this is
Mhm.
going beyond like, no, we just hit the specific Beverly Hills whatever augmentation hospital. Like this is
Yeah.
like kids that need treatment, right? Like
Yeah.
not I want treatment. Like what does the proactive look like?
Yeah. So let me back up just a little bit. So this program, we put it in a bundle. We call it a cyber resiliency bundle. So just in step one, there's three components, and component A of step one here is an incident response retainer. So that is 100% reactive. Aside from the fact that we're going to rewrite your IR plans. So because we are the team that is going to provide incident response command, that's an important distinction here. So we have teams behind us that are doing the actual incident response. We are serving as the incident response commanders, physically going on site, digitally going on site, where it's not warranted to go physically on site, or there's so many locations, insert fortune X here. So we're providing that incident response command and the actual incident response. So to do that effectively, you have to write the IR plan. And you mentioned a number of examples of IR, and we tried to be as comprehensive as we can. So step A of step one is rewriting IR plans top to bottom, going through these exercises with them and
Sure.
knowing that it's somewhat self-serving, right? If we're doing the IR, then one, we ought to have at least been familiar with the plans, better yet, help write them, and take steps to ensure that when we do have to execute that response, that we can do so effectively. But the second step here, B of A, is training,
Yeah.
cybersecurity upskilling, 101. So you're putting that IR retainer in place, rewriting those IR plans, and basically serving as a team to support them, like a SWAT team, if you will. We're
Sure.
training the police department within that organization, and we're standing behind them as the SWAT team. Hey, when you really need us, we're here. We do all of the traditional cybersecurity stuff, kind of in step two here. But the idea is that you graduate from step one to step two, graduate from step two to step three,
Sure.
serving as various, foundational pillars here. So in that
Right.
second step, it is very situation specific. And we can talk about IR plans again until we're blue in the face, but something that's important there is that you're not just picking a canned IR plan off a shelf. The same way you're not just blindly following any of the frameworks. You have to make it your own. Of course, if you have compliance goals, you have to meet them, but there's security requirements beyond that are specific to your organization that you better be sure those edges are shored up and sanded and well taken care of, or you're going to be in a world of hurt. So with this training, it is red team, blue team, purple team training. This is not security awareness training. This is not know before. Forgive me for naming a vendor, but
Yeah, that's
um,
okay.
somebody that everyone's pretty familiar with from a security
Sure.
awareness perspective, anti-phishing, et cetera. This is cybersecurity training for cybersecurity people. Um,
Right. And I
in
think
the
that's
event
largely lacking, right? Like I think
it
this is an
is.
area I had this conversation the other day. If you're a cybersecurity professional And as part of your employee responsibility at the organizational level, it's like, here, watch this security awareness training video so that you can be successful in this company. And it's like, I skipped to the quiz and I got them all right. Like, is
Yep.
that good or is that bad? Now, I have started watching the videos just to see, and I can
Mhm.
tell you that I have learned some things that I probably still would have been successful taking the quiz. And I think that's the part that bothers me. Like, if I can jump to the quiz, answer the questions, they're largely true false. What are we trying to do here? Have me be successful in a quiz, or have me learn and understand the benefits of that process, that exercise, so that I am vigilant and I see something, say something, which largely has been around since long before 9/11.
Yeah.
Like the suitcase that's just in the middle of an airport post past security, like that would be a red flag for pretty much everybody. Would anybody say anything? Probably not, because they're like,
Yep.
well, let's go, screen you and figure out, after we've done interrogating you, that it really wasn't your suitcase. So,
Yeah.
um, I got it. So IR planning is less about being prepared for the response to an incident, but more about what do I have proactively in place so that the events don't happen, or that if they did happen, there is, say, potentially zero impact to company because we've put things in place that add the redundancy and the resiliency to allow us to continue operating as if nothing has happened.
Yeah, I would say it's both. There's a lot of IR
Sure.
companies out there that'll just sell you a retainer. Call us when you need us. They're not involved in
the
writing
the
those IR
boots on the
plans.
ground, right? The
Exactly.
and that's
Exactly.
not, and I don't want to undermine that at all, because I think about some of the companies that I've worked with that I know. I don't know if Jason Ledoux is listening, but he has been. I've been involved with the companies he's been at for a long time, and you can buy the retainer so that if you have a ransomware incident, they are hopping on the plane, they're on site, they're doing the
Yep.
forensics, and they're reducing that window of time to potentially either recover the what was lost, potentially, that can happen, but more importantly, getting you back to operational, because in many cases insurance and otherwise may say, until we have forensics evidence as to what happened, we're going to keep doing forensics, and at some
Yep.
point forensics becomes, I can no longer afford this, you cost more than my attorney.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there's so many things to be said about this whole topic. Like
Yes.
it's so difficult to be brief
What's
here.
one
But
last thing that you would say to the audience? Because I think I still feel a little bit doom and gloom, even though you did give me a glimmer of hope.
yeah, I mean, we haven't even gotten into the other steps of the program here, but cyber resilience is the key focus here, and really understanding what that term means. When we apply cyber resilience to national security, it becomes corporate national security. That's how
Yeah,
we see it. So the number one, first and foremost, most important thing is that cybersecurity training.
yeah,
It's in the event of an incident. I don't care if you're an entry level security analyst, you become an incident responder. You become a
that's
blue
right.
teamer, period.
Yep.
And it's a trial by fire. You've probably never been there before. You're not battle tested, et cetera. So let's put you through those scenarios so that when push comes to shove, you don't just freeze. You kind of know
Right,
what to do.
right.
You're adequately
Panic is
defending.
the bigger enemy of the threat
Absolutely.
actor itself.
Absolutely. Tools are great. Tools are not everything. There's a lot of AI hasn't gotten there yet. People who know this stuff are significantly better at responding than anything automated at this point. So, there's a lot of reason to have hope. There's so many resources out there.
Sure.
We're just one of them. We're vetting these organizations. We're not necessarily, well, I would say we are very vendor agnostic. There are certain organizations that we work with from an IR and upskilling perspective, but we
Gotcha.
choose best of breed, but we're not locked into those. We're very mission driven, and I think if people just start taking small, meaningful steps towards cyber resilience, beginning, in my opinion, with training, followed by incident response, before you get anywhere near doing
Yeah.
a security stack overhaul and
Yeah.
buying the next very attractive looking EDR.
And they
Just
all are, right? The
fundamentals.
shinier the object, the
Oh
more that we
man.
want it. Yeah, we are all raccoons,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
funny. Mike Stewart said this. He goes, any progress in the right direction is good progress,
Absolutely.
as opposed to, like, if you're doing a lot of good things, or if you're making a lot of steps in one direction, and you're going the wrong way, well, then all of those steps were wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Chris, I appreciate
Exactly.
you being on the show. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.